You're watching National Streaming Sports. Over 20 podcasts, 70 shows, and a 3.5-star rating on Roku TV. Check out nessp.info for direct links and deals on the site Bet Us for 125% off your first three deposits in NFL and college odds for upcoming games, Major League Baseball and NBA futures, and boxing wagers. Also, check out Fanatics, sportswear for your favorite teams, and also network merchandise, retro, Northeast Streaming Sports, National Streaming Sports, Big Football, and the Mac and Jack Sports Show t-shirts. Coffee mugs are coming soon.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch.
You're watching Glove Fist with boxing experts Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch. The best boxing show on the internet on the National Streaming Sports Roku channel.
Great intro, Mac. Hi, welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Lotierzo, full-time observer, part-time writer, joined by co-host Jack Hirsch, former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America. Jack, we have a lot to talk about. There was a big fight this weekend. We also talk a lot of football on the show and have some fun. But I want to start off on a sad note and just acknowledge the passing of one of my favorite players to watch as a kid, and that was Eugene Mercury Morris, halfback for the Miami Dolphins during their glory years, 71 and 74. And he passed this week at 77. And I don't know if you knew this or not, Jack, but he is the one that came up with the Perfectville commercial. Did you ever see that, the Perfectville commercial after the Giants beat the Pats? No. All the old Dolphins they're in a driveway, presuming one of their houses, are having a cookout. Zonka, how do you like your burger? Rare. Perfect. Everything's perfect. Then you see a Giants truck pull up and it says, "Dear guys, congratulations. Celebrate one more year, Eli Manning." And Mercury goes, "Perfect." And that's why they called it Perfectville.
And I'll be honest, that Dolphin team's a bunch of bitter old men holding on to an unbeaten record. It was great to have an unbeaten record, but they're not the greatest NFL team of all time. They're the equivalent of an Andre Ward, a Joe Calzaghe retiring unbeaten, claiming that they're the best in their division because they never lost before. But that's for another time. But they did have a
No. You're not going to punch me in the face with that and then say the fight's over. No, Jack, first of all, I respect those guys that record meant so much to them that they celebrated. And here we are going on 53 years or 52 years of it, the record not being broken, okay? They were an underdog in the Super Bowl. Jack, they led the league in points scored, points allowed, most yards gained, least yards allowed, least amount of penalties. And as Bill Parcells says, somebody that you love, you are what your record is. And if that's the case, then if that's not the case, why do we keep score? They never lost.
Rocky Marciano is the greatest heavyweight champion of all time, Frank. He was unbeaten. So if you're telling me Rocky Marciano is the greatest heavyweight champion of all time, I'll tell you that Miami Dolphin team is the greatest NFL team.
I'm telling you that the Dolphins didn't pick their schedule. They had to play playoff games on the road, and they did it with a backup quarterback.
Frank, you would not even put Marciano, even consider him as being the greatest heavyweight champion of all time. You would put him far below Ali and Lewis. So don't tell me with this Miami Dolphin team who won all three games in the playoffs, including the Redskin game, by a combined total of 17 points. And the Redskins had no offense at all. The only reason they were made the Redskins maybe a 1-point favorite was because of how charismatic their coach George Allen
They
was.
were a 2.5-point favorite.
Okay.
Larry Brown was the NFL MVP that year. They held him to 70 yards, and their defense did not allow any points at all. The only points they got were on the Mike Bass field goal block return. That was it. And then they came back the following year and went 12-2 and dominated everybody.
That was a better team than the unbeaten team, clearly. They were a dominant team the year after the unbeaten record. That team is one of the greatest.
Jack, let me ask you this. We are both old enough to have had watched that team that year. And when they went undefeated, didn't you think
Frank,
that it would happen again?
It is a boxing show, and I think the reason you want to talk about those teams, you're a little depressed about the way the Dolphins are currently, so we'll give you a pass. It's going so bad for them, their season's slipping away. You're going into the glory days, but there was a big fight that took place on the weekend, Frank, and I lack the guts to pick an upset a lot of the time. I just lack the guts. You even lack more guts than I do, because I thought the Boys had a chance to spring the upset. I said I wouldn't be shocked, but you were hedging both ways. You were tilting. You badly wanted to pick the upset, Frank. I at least felt it was a 60-40 fight in Joshua's favor. So I picked him by decision. But maybe I thought 65-35, but you were really close to the 50-50, and then you copped out. You didn't want to look bad. Want to look bad.
Normally,
Joshua destroyed him. You lack the guts, Frank.
Normally, you like to kick sand when there's none to kick, but you have a little bit of credence on this. But let me just say this, and here's what hurts, Jack. For the last 2 years, I've said Anthony Joshua is a flawed fighter. I said he has not been reconstructed under Ben Davidson. I said that they picked his opponents right, like you would if you were protecting a fighter that had a vulnerability. I said I don't like him against punchers. I said Du Bois was the biggest puncher he would face since Ruiz, and yet all those things that pointed to a Du Bois win, what did I do? I figured it's Joshua's career fight. I had questions about Dubois because of the way he lost to Usyk and a little bit Joe Joyce. So I thought this was one time, Jack, if he could ever make a stand, it would be in this fight. And I think as long as I've been picking fights, getting this one wrong is right up there with bothering me the most, because I saw the handwriting on the wall, yet I went with Joshua figuring he had one left in him, and it was better for business down the road. And like you said, I lacked the guts to pick the fight and the upset.
But Frank, business-wise, let's use the old line that Bert Sugar used after the first Ali Frazier fight. The winner that night was the loser. The loser that night was the winner. Nothing based on Joshua's performance, of course, but he still leaves the ring as the bigger name than the Boys. I mean, they could still talk about matching him up with Tyson Fury, and it would still be massive because we're in an entertainment era, Frank. And Joshua has to name the entertainment. Let me play devil's advocate and throw this at you for 1 second, and let me hear what you think. If I say that compare Joshua to Lennox Lewis, who got knocked out twice, got stopped twice. The first time by Oliver McCall. He was in bad trouble, and then got knocked cold by Hasim Rahman. I could say, well, Lennox Lewis' chin, look at the way he persevered and turned himself into one of the great heavyweights of all time. If he did it, what's the difference between him and Joshua?
I just think when you watch Lennox fight, I think his chin is better. I think that he handles adversity better than Joshua. I think he has more tools than Joshua. And look, Joshua did something Lennox Lewis never did, Jack, and that was in the Klitschko fight, got off the canvas and came back and won by stoppage. And you know what? And Tyson never did that, and neither did Lennox Lewis. And I've given Joshua, and I've probably overvalued him because of that all these years. But I mean, Jack, when Anthony Joshua gets hit with a big shot, he panics. His hands are down. His chin is up. His legs turn to spaghetti, and his fundamentals go out the window. And I just don't. That's just not going to change. And as I said before the fight, I said Dubois' best chance was to jump on him, get him going back, and put the seed of doubt in his mind. And that's exactly what he did.
Let's talk a moment about the winner of the fight, Daniel Dubois. Is it quite possible that he has substantially improved since the Usyk fight? 3 wins in a row. He looked good with Jarrell Miller, looked good against Hrgovic, and looked good here against Joshua. So is he a fighter that's on an upswing? Is he basically the same guy that Usyk took care of? Because I'm going to tell you, if he's basically the same guy that Usyk took care of, if Usyk beats Fury in the rematch, and then there's no reason why he shouldn't beat Dubois again unless there's real improvement there from the first fight. And so how, as time goes by, are we looking at one of the great heavyweights of all time in Usyk, perhaps?
You know, Jack, I hate to say that while he's still active and we're not sitting back looking at his career, because remember 5 years ago, people were talking about Joshua and Wilder like that. And look how we look at them today. I will say that I think Dubois' win over Joshua makes Usyk look even better. And to answer your question, I do think Dubois has gotten a little better. I think he's got his confidence back. I think he's putting his punches together better. But I wouldn't give him a chance to beat Usyk in a rematch, even based on that fight.
But I'm going to ask you this. After Fury is done with Usyk, regardless of the result, what is the biggest fight in the heavyweight division? It's still Joshua Fury, like it or not, even if Fury gets stopped by Usyk this time around. Just the idea of the matchup, Joshua and Fury, is certainly more appealing from an entertainment viewpoint than Dubois and Usyk going at it again.
Jack, you mean to tell me if Usyk beats Fury conclusively, assuming that the rematch comes off in December, which I'm not positive, but let's say it does, and Usyk wins, you mean to tell me Fury, after looking bad against Ngannou, running out of gas against Fury, losing to Usyk, and then losing to Usyk again, you mean to tell me people would still want to see Anthony Joshua fight Tyson Fury? For what? What does it mean?
It's entertainment. It's the mesh of personalities, styles. You're living in an era where you could sell Jake Paul against Mike Tyson. And unlike that, this is a legitimate fight between two guys who would still be top 5 contenders. You'd still have to rate them in the top 5, even if it's 4th and 5th, because they're the best of the rest, still, even with losses.
Jack, how many right now? Who you have to pick right now? Fury against Usyk. Who are you taking?
I go with Usyk, and I changed my tune right after they fought. I said to you, I think Fury's going to win the rematch. Something tells me, Frank, like it did the first fight where I changed and went with Usyk at the end, that Fury's gotten on in age. He's abused his body. I have no doubts that he's training hard for this fight, but Usyk is training every bit as hard. I get the feeling Fury may have lost something physically, combined with his age, that he's never going to be able to get back no matter how hard he trains. He's still going to be a heck of a good fighter, don't get me wrong, but I think it's maybe evaporated his advantage that he would
Who
have
would
had
you
over
take,
Usyk.
Fury or Zhang?
Oh my, Zhang is a big puncher. And Fury's been hurt a number of times. Wow, wow, wow.
Just for
I think
conversation.
I think I think Zhang at one point catches him with the big shot at one point and puts him out.
How
Yeah,
about Fury against Piccoli?
Piccoli is a beast. He gets to Fury, I think. Yeah.
All right, so that would be.
Yeah.
So my point is this: there are at least 3 guys that you would favor to beat Fury right now. Okay. Now on Joshua, I would favor Zhang, Usyk, Piccoli. I would favor Fury over him. So it's like you could make a case that neither guy are in the top 5. So I guess it would be a big fight. It wouldn't be a big fight to me. And if I'm Joshua and I'm going to continue to fight, the only fight I would care about would be Fury because of the money and because Fury is as washed up and shot as he is. And I don't think he gets hurt physically.
Yeah, I'm talking about top 5 based on merit, what they have maybe done over their career. But then again, what has Fury done? I mean, he lost a tight decision to Usyk the first fight. That's more of a boost to me than another heavyweight winning against a mediocre guy. If you take on an elite fighter like Usyk and basically fight him to a standstill for the most part. Yeah, I know it's intriguing. It's intriguing, but sometimes we put too much emphasis on one fight. Piccoli looked like an absolute beast the way he took out Jared Anderson. But are we overrating him based on that one performance? I don't think we are, because Jared Anderson came into that fight very ready and fought very hard. Yet still,
and there's a lot of sparring stories about Piccoli that kind of back up the power that we've heard about. Hey, Craig Wright. AJ, 2-4 against prime contenders. If you want to include Parker when they fought, that's a good point. And you make me think of something, Craig.
Povetkin was a legitimate contender.
Yes.
Greg, when Joshua stopped him, Klitschko was a legitimate contender. Even coming off the loss to Fury, he was obviously, a threat going into that fight. Dillian White. Okay, was
when they fought, he was up and coming too. He was a factor. Yeah,
those were legitimate victories. I mean,
but let me just say this, Jack, and I don't like hearing this, but I don't want to hear anybody say, and I know it's easy to dump on him now, but I don't want to hear anybody say Anthony Joshua doesn't have heart. He has never really ducked anybody. Even when he's been hit and knocked down, he gets up. He tries to fight back. Look, he wasn't blessed with a great chin.
I got to call you out on that.
Go ahead.
He did duck one man. He did duck Deontay Wilder.
I'm not buying that, Jack.
Listen, you could say it was promoter Eddie Hearn. He could have insisted the fight be made. You're the boss when you're the fighter.
But not every fighter looks at it like that, Jack, when you have an alpha guy like Eddie Hearn.
Floyd Patterson never ducked anyone. That's why Customato and he broke up, because Floyd Patterson insisted he fight Sonny Liston when everyone in D'Amato was begging him not to. No, when you're the fighter, you're in charge. You can make it happen when you command the type of power and Anthony Joshua does.
I'm not buying that Anthony Joshua ducked Wilder. I know you say Craig agrees with you.
Wilder was
I'm not, because I saw him issue plenty of challenges to Wilder too.
Thank you, Craig.
Okay. Anyhow, Joshua, I don't want to hear he's not tough or he's a quitter. He just doesn't have an upper tier chin against elite guys that can hit. It's sort of like the quarterback I pick on the most, Tua Tagovailoa for the Dolphins. Look, he is not built to be an elite NFL player. He doesn't have the body. He's injured all the time. Joshua doesn't have the chin to fight the big punchers and survive. That's just
Let me
genetic.
throw this quick. I mentioned this before the show. There are 4 belts out there, 4 sanctioning bodies, 4 major titles. What's more likely to happen in the future? Joshua grabs a major sanctioning body belt, not gift wrapped to him, beating a legitimate heavyweight. I'm not saying who, but legitimately earning it, not being gift wrapped.
For a title.
Right, for a title, Tua being one of the 4 top quarterbacks rebounding before his career's over.
Okay, neither are going to happen, but since I will not hedge, Jack, I will tell you that it will be Tua because idiot writers, after he has a couple good games, will place him up there with the elite quarterbacks again. So neither can happen, but to answer your question, Joshua would at least have to beat a real fighter, where Tua, it'll be an opinion of a couple of writers that'll say he's in the top 5, and that's not the case. He's never been he was never one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the league, and he never will be.
Okay, Joshua has a rematch clause. Now, I don't know what a rematch would pay. It's about business. Eddie Hearn, Joshua's promoter, seemed to indicate on one end he says, yeah, we're going to exercise the rematch clause, but then he's backing off because he wants to see what's going on with Fury and Usyk. And they're obsessed, it seems, with Eddie Hearn, at least, with cashing out against Tyson Fury, because he said, look, if Fury wins, he would be allowed a voluntary defense, which he can make against Joshua. And if Fury loses, it's a great fight to make, to see who gets back on track. And it does have tremendous interest, the Fury-Joshua fight. In one end, it's not as big as before, but listen, I don't mean to compare either guy as far as greatness to Ali and Frazier. But when Ali and Frazier fought the second time, that was a massively big fight. People forget that was, some people are feeling it a super fight too. It wasn't as big as the fight of the century. Their first fight was historical, but the second fight, you could argue, was, Frank, as far as a huge heavyweight fight, I could argue it's a top 25 in heavyweight history, off the top of my head. Right?
I might even put it higher than that, but yes, I agree with what you're saying.
But there you go. And that's what would be Fury and Joshua. It would still, I think, maybe be a top 12 fight that could be made today of all the matchups that could be made.
Jack, you're probably right. As far as interest, yes, I'm speaking from my perspective. If Fury loses to Usyk conclusively, I just don't see how he and Joshua could be a big fight. Well, I know that neither one will ever hold that belt again. So it is basically a gimmick and a sideshow.
Don't count Fury out against Usyk in the rematch. I'm not counting him out. I've kind of hedged, and I'm kind of leaning towards Usyk because Usyk is so darn solid. And I know Usyk's dedication. He is training so hard for this rematch. He's the ultimate pro. He has this great amateur background. But and Fury's older now. I think getting older, they're both getting old. But I just think it affects Fury a little more physically getting older than it's going to affect Usyk.
The problem for Usyk is, Jack, is his last fight with Fury was his March 8th fight. And I just don't know if he can get quite that high again and hit that high note again. But I just don't think he has to be as good this time, because I think that last fight took a lot more out of Fury than it did him. And I think Fury is on the downside as much as Joshua is. Fury might hang in there, Jack, for a little while, but after 6 or 7 rounds, he'll be out of gas and Fury will beat him up. Usyk will beat him up.
After the fight, Fury met Usyk at ringside. They had a quick interaction, and Fury put his arm around him, and he told him, the way you took care of Joshua, Du Bois, when you fought them, you showed these young men how it should be done. Like he was praising Usyk and like he was patting him on the back. And at that moment, Fury really wanted to give Usyk his respect. And you could tell Usyk appreciated. Now, Fury's a loose cannon. He's going to say stupid things going forward. He's going to change his tune. But at that moment at ringside, Fury was kind of like bowing down to Usyk, going like, "You're the man in this division. You're the guy. You showed us all how it should be done. Respect to you, brother." You know,
Jack, you know what's crazy?
Admiration.
What's crazy is the best fights in the heavyweight division. The couple that I want to see the most, I'm not sure if they're big sellers. Like, I would like to see Usyk fight Zhang. I would like to see Usyk fight Bacoli. I don't need to see him fight Joshua or Du Bois or even Fury again. I think they're better fights. I think those guys actually have a better shot to beat Usyk than the other guys do, than Fury does, or Du Bois or Joshua. We've seen those fights. None of those three guys are going to beat Fury.
Unless Zhang catches them, it would have to be one punch.
I'm not saying he would beat him, but I would be intrigued to see how Usyk would handle the power.
I don't know how with Bacoli. I'm anxious to see Bacoli fight anyone now. I just want to see him even against a very average guy. I want to see what he has. He looks so good with Jared Anderson. But then again, Frank, sometimes we get lulled into one fight, one performance. And then maybe he goes in against the guy who can box, move, who he can't run over, and he looks very ordinary and gets picked apart, and even maybe loses his next fight.
I would pick Usyk to beat him.
Excuse me?
I think he could be outboxed, but I just think I would rather see those fights, the unknown fights, than the same retreads that we've seen. As good as I don't need to see Dubois against Usyk again. Dubois not beating him.
You're advising Joshua. Do you take the rematch with Dubois, which you have a contract where you can get the rematch? Do you enforce that, or is it a bad fight to go into after this fight? Is there any way? Let me put it another way. Can you see a halfway decent path for Joshua if he fights smartly? Obviously, he'll have to come in the ring in great shape. Goes to camp, dedicates himself. Do you see a clear path for him maybe reversing this result?
Boy, Jack, that's a tall order. I don't know. If I was Joshua and I wanted to fight and I was offered the rematch, I would take it with the mindset that I'm never going to go in a boxing ring again, and I would just kill myself and do my best to win. And that would be my swan song. So that would be the only fight I would take. Because if he fought Dubois again and lost, but was more competitive, it wouldn't hurt his legacy any more than it's already been dinged. But if he fights somebody else, Jack, and he gets beaten, what's going to happen is if he fights somebody and we can see the whole, we can see why it's a Jermaine Franklin or somebody like that. And we can see, okay, this is a safe fight. And we said this all along. After Ruiz, there was always an angle. It wasn't a guy that had a big punch. The only guy he fought that was a perceived puncher after Ruiz was Ngannou, but he couldn't deliver it. And Joshua was confident against him.
Yeah, something I want to talk about trainers like Ben Davison. I have no doubts that he's a decent trainer. I'm not questioning that. But these trainers who are made into like wonder men. You know, a fighter's career is going so. So what they do is hook up with a new trainer, and we're led to believe they're a new man. They're going to work their match. They're going to fight. And I'm going to tell you, it's one of the most overrated things. Trainers can be important in certain situations, but they don't change the fighter much. Maybe they refocus them. If they could get them to be more dedicated, they could make a difference to a point. The great Emmanuel Stewart made a difference with Lennox Lewis, you know, but Lennox Lewis was already, you know, a heavyweight champion, you know, a top guy. And so
Jack, think about this. I think it's 95% the fighter, maybe or 90, and the 10% or 5% the trainer. But the fighter does need that. But you mentioned Emmanuel Stewart. Nobody will argue. One of the greatest trainers ever. But you could make a case that in the two biggest fights of his career, his guy came up on the short end with Hearns against Leonard and Hearns against Hagler, but it goes back to the fighter. I mean, Manuel Stewart didn't lose those fights. It comes down to the fighter. I'm sorry, Dundee could not beat Frazier with Jimmy Ellis, but he beat him 2 out of 3 with Ali.
Well, no. A trainer could adapt a strategy. If he has a great relationship with the fighter, he can make a difference. Like with Jimmy Ellis and Jerry Quarry, the finals of the WBA heavyweight tournament. Quarry won his fights. He back to the rope, was a great counterpuncher, would lull opponents in. Ellis had strict orders. Don't follow him to the ropes. And he gets on the ropes, just back off to the middle of the ring. Keep the fight to the middle of the ring.
Right.
Trainers mean a lot.
Jack,
I think
yes.
as far as strategy goes, but
where was that strategy when Ellis fought Frazier? Because Dundee told him, keep him turning in the corners, keep it in the center of the ring, all the things that you would want to do against Frazier, but he wasn't good enough to do it against Frazier. So it still comes down to the fighter. I used to speak to Kevin Barry, okay? I think when I saw David Tua on the night of the young heavyweights, when he knocked out Ruiz in 19 seconds, Jack, I forget who it was, one of my buddies, I turned to him and said, that guy's going to be heavyweight champ of the world. He's got quick hands, he's got dynamite in both hands, and he has a cast iron chin. Well, but David Tua could be outboxed. Now, Kevin Barry told me in the gym, he said he looked like a big Joe Frazier, cutting the ring off, slipping the jab, going to the body, forcing it on the inside. He goes, come the night of the fight, we can't get him to do it. So it is, to me, it's 90 to 95% the fighter, but the fighter needs what that 5% that the good trainers bring.
I don't think any trainer could make a difference with Anthony Joshua. That's
none.
But we were led to believe, and Eddie Hearn with his malarkey was saying, with Ben Davison, this is a new AJ. This isn't the same AJ that twice lost to Usyk. You want to know something? Eddie Hearn's right. Joshua's not as good now as he was when he lost to Usyk both fights. So Eddie Hearn indirectly is telling us the truth. Can Joshua even get back to that form? The Joshua who had Usyk in trouble, serious trouble in the, I think
ninth round.
The 9th round of the second fight. Will we ever see that Anthony Joshua again? Because that Anthony Joshua, would be a threat to anyone.
No, Jack. And I also think a lot of that is that Joshua's not worried about Usyk because Usyk isn't a life taker. And back to the trainer thing, we heard before this fight that Anthony Joshua had exercised all the demons. He was on the upswing, had his head on right. Ben Davidson got a lot of credit for that. And you know what? He folded more against Dubois than he did against Ruiz. And I just could not believe how his fundamentals went out the window once he was buzzed. Chin up, hands down, sticking his tongue out, laughing like he wasn't hurt. It was pathetic.
A question: if Anthony Joshua retires now, hypothetically, his career ended now, Hall of Fame or not?
I guess the fact that I have to think about it that much, but Jack, he will make it. So it's hard for me to be objective because there's no doubt he's a 2-time champ and he did fight most of the good guys of his era.
Who's more Hall of Fame worthy? Let me throw this as a cut in: Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, because both of their names are going to come up in that regard. Some people are going to feel they belong in. Some
Joshua.
Absolutely not. Joshua, you think he had a little better career than Wilder?
I think he fought better people. He had a better career, and they both went out bad by getting knocked out.
Well, Joshua, his story might, there might be a couple of chapters left still in it, but it doesn't look good.
If neither one of them fight again, Joshua goes in before Wilder. And Jack, you know what? I think Wilder will make it too, because you know what the argument will be? He made 10 defenses of the WBC title. That'll be his argument.
What happens if Wilder moves down in weight and he can make the weight and wins one of these Bridgerweight titles?
What
And he
happens?
just wins it all. Yeah.
That'll solidify him getting in the Hall of Fame, but that's about it.
Okay. Yeah. Frank, there was another show that I actually covered for Boxing News off TV. I mean, we can't travel all. Jaime Munguia made his return to the ring against Eric Benzanian. And Munguia took care of business. 10th round stoppage. Had problems in the early going, but he made a little bit of a statement, and in my report I wrote down him, Calaplant, and Edgar Berlanga all trying to be vice president of the super middleweight division. It's Canelo's division, Farnway. It's Canelo and the rest, But Munguia does have a little upside, still at 27. There is still room. Unlike the other guys, I can see Munguia still improving.
Jack, you know what I like about it the most? Now, look, I'm not going to try to con anybody here. I fell asleep after the 4th round that night. That was Friday night. I fell asleep after the 4th round, so I didn't see the whole fight. However, I'm impressed. Jack, your mic's off. I'm impressed that Munguia got back in the ring.
Coming in, Frank. You didn't want to hear
I'm sorry.
the ringing.
Jack, I'm impressed, and it says a lot to me that Munguia got back in the ring so soon against a quality opponent and didn't pull a Jermell Charlo and wait around and just let time go by and not capitalize off of a good showing. And I hope that Edgar Berlanga does the same thing because he has a little momentum now. I'm sure he learned a lot in that fight. We saw he has a chin. We saw he can go 12 rounds, and we know that he can punch. So he has a future too. I hope he does the same thing.
I'm not sure. Listen, Berlanga did better than I thought, and I gave him his flowers, on the last show. And I said, look, I was wrong. I said, look, he didn't do anything to make me eat crow, but he did enough to make me smell the crow, take a sniff, okay? But the point, is it possible Canelo is just losing it? I thought he was on the decline 3 years ago, and he's kind of held it off. Is Canelo, based on the Berlanga fight, he might be very much ready to be taken.
I think as a finisher, Jack, and his stamina might be a little bit of an issue.
And Canelo really has no one to fight right now. He's going to have to.
That's why he's going to fight Crawford.
Yeah, perhaps, but he's going to have to be creative. What he's going to do next or whatever. I wouldn't, and it's not going to be easy. But there was another fight from that Arizona show underneath the Munguia fight that was kind of bizarre. One of our friends is Russell Peltz, the great Philadelphia promoter, but he's a manager now. And one of the guys who he manages is a Philadelphia heavyweight, Joey DeWetchko, okay? And DeWetchko fought Richard Torres, a 2020 Olympic silver medalist in the heavyweight division. And Torres has been matched very easy to this point. And this was actually a step-up fight against DeWetchko. Torres was expected to win, and Torres won on the 5th round disqualification. DeWetchko kept losing his mouthpiece. He lost it 4 times in 1 round, and I don't get it. Could he have been spitting out the mouthpiece the whole time? How many times can you spit the darn mouthpiece out? The referee, Wes Melton, kept warning him. And the ironic part about it, that one time he didn't intentionally, this is true, spit it out. He gets hit with an uppercut, DeWetchko, which knocks the mouthpiece out legitimately. And DeWetchko unleashes a great left hook at the same time. And then the ref comes and that's it. You're disqualified. So the ending was bizarre. But I guess spitting out the mouthpiece so much earlier, the ref had no tolerance for anything at that point.
I think he saw that Joey didn't have anything to win the fight with. And the thing got me is he never rinsed the mouthpiece off, did he?
No, he was disgusted.
He just took it off the canvas and put it back in. I don't remember him going to the corner and rinsing it off.
I want to say something too. On that show with this fighter, I think Alan Garcia, he was unbeaten in 15 fights. He was kind of being touted, as a woman trainer there. And he fought a guy with a 15-13 record. and got caught with one shot in the 5th round and got knocked out. So it shows
I
you the
missed that.
craziness of boxing, in which like anything can happen.
What do you think of Torres?
I think he showed a lot of improvement in this fight because I don't think Dwechko is a stiff. I actually think he can fight. I mean, he's a good club fighter, Dwechko. A good club
Like
fighter.
a Joe Hip?
Yeah, that's a fair comparison. Hip was a tiny bit more advanced because Dwechko really didn't have the credentials. Oh, this is a great story that Dwechko told me a while ago when I did a story on him about a year and a half ago. A rumor was going around, and you're going to love this, that he knocked out Anthony Joshua in sparring. And I tried to get it out of Dwechko. He just didn't want to talk about it. And as much as I tried to get it out of him, he says, look, it's something I just don't want to talk about. We don't talk about things like that. And you could think Dwechko, I get the feeling there may have been a little something to it because Dwechko tries to be he seems like a very honorable guy. And what goes on in the gym, he feels should stay in the gym.
Right.
So that may lend a little credence to what you say and what seemed to have absolutely been confirmed about Joshua's chin, if he indeed did get, hurt bad in the gym.
I was hoping that Joey was going to be a little more competitive. I didn't think he'd win. I knew he couldn't get a decision. He'd have to stop him. I mean, and his style doesn't match up where he's going to win a decision.
Yeah,
but
Richard,
I will say I agree with you. Torres has improved. And what I like about him is I like his intensity. He doesn't come out and look exclusively for the knockout. He sets it up. He throws a lot of jabs. He can move a little bit. He closes the distance a little quicker than people think. How far will he go, Jack? I don't know. But I think, you like to talk about, like, did guys get everything out of their ability? When we talk about guys, some did, some didn't. I think Torres is one of those guys that's going to get everything out and leave nothing on the table.
But he was in the Olympics a few years ago. Now's the time when you hit the 4-year mark from, the time you're in the Olympics, you should be ready to fight anyone at this point. If you've been matched, you've been in the gym all along. Look, Ali was a 1960 Olympic gold medalist. 4 years later, he was beating Liston. Joe Frazier won the gold 64. 4 years later, he's beating Buster Mathis for part of the title. George Foreman, 5 years later, he's beating Joe Frazier.
But Jack, look at the difference, though. Foreman had 37 fights. Ali had 19. And Frazier, I think, had, when he fought Mathis, I think he had 20 or 21. Torres has had, that was his 11th fight.
So much that, I mean, lighter weight divisions, they could fight for world title after a few fights. I mean, but the point is, Torres, would he be ready for step-up fight, a battle of the prospects? And they never do this anymore, hardly ever. Jared Anderson against Torres, intriguing fight. Torres stepping up. Let's see, does Anderson have whatever? I just want to see, these guys.
I think Torres' people would take the fight. I don't think Anderson's would.
Well, if that's the case, we maybe have to start writing Anderson off. He said he's going to come back after the Bacoli loss. He was going to come back stronger more than ever. That's what they always say after loss, Frank. Oh, I can't wait to get back to the gym. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. A case in point of Devin Haney. Devin Haney was at the Joshua DuBois fight. Devin Haney was complaining online about Eddie Hearn is full of it. He's cheap. He's this, he's that. I think Eddie Hearn is fed up with Devin Haney. He used to promote him. Devin Haney had to leave him for a little while to go with George Kambosos. And then they called Eddie Hearn to, indirectly come back. Not quite promote him, but Eddie Hearn flew to New York to support Devin Haney in his fight against Ron Garcia. He wasn't getting paid anything, but to keep the relationship going. And then the Haneys are giving him the business. They want to know why Eddie Hearn doesn't purse bid. He doesn't do this. He doesn't do that. So Eddie Hearn says, you contacted me 6 a.m. the day of the fight. I take care of my fighters first. He basically let him have it. You want to know something? He's right, because Devin Haney's nasty to Eddie Hearn on social media. Why should Eddie Hearn? What does he owe to Devin Haney? That's not his fighter.
All I can say that, Jack, is Devin Haney leaves a lot to be desired to me as a person outside of the ring. Some of his shenanigans in the ring, I think he ought to just get his butt back in the gym and get another fight before we forget about him.
I think the problem with Devin Haney, and I can understand, he's got money now. He made some great money off the Garcia fight. He can travel. He can do this. He could do that. The old Marvin Hagler line. It's hard to do road work in the morning when you go to bed wearing silk pajamas.
Silk pajamas, yeah.
Right, when you get the feeling, Devin Haney, who has a lot of heart in the ring. The Garcia loss, I think, bummed him out too. The whole performance, it made him more depressed than to be resolute.
He's got to get his act together and get back in the ring, because he's definitely talented, and he's back to being undefeated, so he has a reason to go on.
Frank, statistically speaking, he's undefeated. In everyone's mind, he lost the fight. Same thing with Riddick Bowe, the Galata fights. Bowe officially won both fights. To our way of thinking, he lost both fights because he got beat up both fights. He got the result, okay? But when we think of Bowe Galata, we think of Galata getting the better of it.
And Galata did work him over in both fights.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But I still think that Garcia played the system, and we know he failed a drug test or two. He didn't make weight. So there were some things that led to that fight being as one-sided as it was.
Frank, we had a little fun last week, like the overachiever, underachiever thing, as far as fighters getting the most out of their career. You understand the question perfectly, and I know that because when I mentioned the greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali, you said, and I agree, was an underachiever. Had he trained harder late in his career, he would have been more effective. He would have even been adding to his greatness, but he slacked off. Underachiever, and as much as you hate to admit it, I think you'll go the opposite way. Floyd Mayweather, underachiever.
Jack, that's tough, because if you take the money into the account, it's hard to say he was an underachiever. But I have always said that if he would have taken more challenging fights, it might have pushed him and escalated him to raise his game a little bit more, and he never had to. So I'm not going to say underachiever, but I can see a path where you could get there.
No, I an overachiever when you look at the way his career turned out.
That's what I said, overachiever, but I could see a path where you could say that maybe we never saw the best of him because he waited to fight certain guys when they were kind of on the decline.
Anthony Joshua, we're talking about. If he retired now, well, overachiever, underachiever throughout his career.
Can you call a guy that won the unified title twice an underachiever?
Done more, was more expected of him. Did he disappoint?
Okay, when you throw that onto it, Jack, I would probably say slightly an underachiever, and probably one of the fighters I was the most off on regarding their potential. When he beat Vladimir Klitschko, Jack, I thought Anthony Joshua was going to go on to be a poor man's Lennox Lewis, not a poor man's Frank Bruno.
We could both agree was an overachiever. Coming up from cruiserweight, everything he's accomplished, an absolute overachiever. And even guys who are belt holders, not as well known, like a Paulie Malignaggi, he was a great overachiever. Couldn't punch,
absolutely,
no power, no this. Overachiever. Let me throw another name at you who was around Paulie's time, who even Paulie fought late in the guy's career. Zab Judah, overachiever, underachiever.
I think a little bit underachiever. Super talented, but let outside distractions get in the way and kind of, thwarted his career a little bit. I'll give you one. Shane Mosley.
Underachiever. Because I'm going to
Nice.
tell you, we were thinking in terms that he can be an all-time great. Okay, perhaps he had that ability, and the way
He was on that path at lightweight.
He was on the path, and the greatness. He came out in a great first fight against Oscar De La Hoya when they were both basically in their prime. Him winning that fight, and he didn't turn out Mosley to be as good as, let's say, a Terence Crawford. Even that close. That's what I mean. Okay.
Should he have stopped at 140, Jack?
Well, let's put it this way. There was a time in Mosley's career when he was unbeaten. There was an imaginary welterweight tournament I was asked to be a part of with two other riders. And one of the matchups was Mosley against Jose Napoles. And I picked Mosley to beat Napoles. But Mosley was unbeaten and riding high at the time. We thought, wow, what a big star. And as it turned out, now that Mosley's career is over, you have to give the edge to Napoles. So that tells me he's
But I mean, what if he would have stopped at 140 and picked up a couple belts there?
It's not the belts. We were looking for superstardom.
I mean, it would make him a 4-division champ. He would have fought some other good guys there. I think he messed up by going from 35 to 47.
But Tyson Fury, overachiever, underachiever.
Started out as an overachiever, ended up as an underachiever.
He's an underachiever. It's like Mickey in the Rocky movie said, you had the talent to do this, but instead the Tyson Fury didn't cut it. Some fighters are hard to say, but if you had to give him like Sugar Ray Leonard, overachiever, underachiever.
I guess you have to say overachiever.
Overachiever, right. Marvin Hagler. Same.
Overachiever.
Sugar Ray Robinson.
I can't. He's the GOAT. I can't call him an underachiever.
I think he's an overachiever. No, you could still be the greatest of all time and be an overachiever when you think of everything he did.
You mean underachiever, like Ali?
Yeah. Ali was an underachiever. He could have been greater, Ali.
Robinson he just fought too long.
Robinson could not have been any greater, I don't think, during his career. Those fights he lost late in his career, that was age. All the time. And even then he went the distance in those fights.
How about David Tua? Clearly an underachiever.
Underachiever, but I got a little tongue-tied before when you talk about Kevin Barry and then referring to the Lennox Lewis fight, the way he looked good in training. Trainers always going to say that, Mac. They're not going to say that guy looked lousy, because if they say that guy looked good in training, they get some of the credit.
But Jack, he didn't say look good in training. He said he listened. He listened. He said during the fights he didn't listen against Chris Bird.
There's one thing I want you to consider when he fought Lennox Lewis. Lewis comfortably outboxed him. Tua was not taking any chances. Tua was basically a zone fighter. That's how Emmanuel Stewart once described Joe Louis to me. He's great within his punching zone. Tua was kind of like that. If you moved around Tua, he had a hard time catching a guy. But if you came right to Tua, like a Mike Tyson may have been, you're in a big danger zone if you come to Tua, major danger zone, And against
Lennox Jack, Lewis, Mike?
Keep in mind Lewis's power. Lennox Lewis was a hard hitter. Tua may have felt the power and figured, I think that played a role. But when you go back when he said he was a zone fighter, what I would have said to Emmanuel Stewart was, okay, how many fighters have more than one zone? Only boxers can have one zone. Boxer punchers and swarmers and punchers, Jack, they're all in one zone. Only the guys like an Ali or a Mayweather or maybe a Crawford,
they have different zones. Most guys either have to be in or out. The guys that have multiple zones can fight from different ranges.
No. Some guys like a Joe Frazier cut the ring off. They move in. They're constantly applying
He's
pressure.
one zone.
And then, it's not really, no, not if you're moving across the ring a lot after an opponent. You're not in the one zone. The ring has a lot of different zones, but Lewis wasn't known for really cutting the ring off. He would catch guys.
Joe Louis, Jack, was good at cutting the ring off. I mean, Billy Conn gave him some trouble because he was a small target and he had really good wheels, but Lewis cut the ring off a lot. Not as good as Frazier, but he was a little more upright and more of a boxer puncher because he went in behind his jab, where Frazier didn't really use his jab. I think Frazier was a one-zone fighter. He had to be going forward and he had to be on the inside. And the only guy he couldn't do that against was George Foreman, and that's the only guy he fought he never beat, unless we count Jumbo Cummings.
Is it too early to start talking about the Beterbiev-Bivol fight?
No, that's a great fight.
It's kind of bothers me. A couple of weeks ago, I briefly spoke to John Scully, who's Beterbiev's assistant trainer. Now, he didn't tell me anything revealing. I forgot why I had to speak to him on something else. But I asked him, well, how's Arthur looking in training camp? The injury he had, is it hampering him? So Scully said, no, it's not hampering him. He's looking good. I said, well, how's he looking in training in general? And Scully says, no, he's looking pretty good. What I wanted to hear is he's going to destroy Bivol, Jack. I'm telling you, he's looking great. That would make me feel more comfortable with my.
He'll say that as the fight gets closer.
Well, he never really said it, it's off the record. And when's the trainer going to say, oh, my guy isn't looking good, I'm worried, I'm this, I'm that. Everyone's putting this positive spin on it. And then when the fight's over, we hear what was going wrong and, the name blame.
If you had to pick that fight right now, who would you take?
I don't want to make my switch. I like Beterbiev all along. That it's like a political campaign where you're thinking, wow, Bivol has really been looking good. But I think you said something that stuck with me. Yeah, he pushed around a smaller Canelo Alvarez. And everyone's going crazy about Bivol. And then he looked good with Zurdo Ramirez, who's a decent fighter. Don't get me wrong.
Who's also a big guy.
Big guy. Bivol, did he truly improve a tremendous amount? And is age catching up to Beterbiev? What bothers me about Beterbiev a little, he's been in competitive fights before his power broke through, and he puts on relentless pressure, relentless. Marcus Brown, an Olympian Staten Island, unbeaten, was giving him a good fight. He just couldn't stick with Beterbiev because of the relentless pressure. Even though the styles are different, Beterbiev, in a sense, is a light heavyweight Joe Frazier. Not quite with style, not with the bobbing and weaving.
I get what you're saying. He's a pressure guy.
Here's a pressure guy. Bivol isn't going to back him up. And if he does back Beterbiev up at times, eventually Beterbiev is going to come forward and it's going to be to Bivol's undoing. So Bivol is just going to have to basically outbox him, throughout. Can he withstand the pressure for 12 rounds?
I think Bivol is stronger than he looks and gets credit for. And if his chin is exceptional, I think he wins the fight. A lot of it's going to come down to Jack, how good his chin is, because we know that Beterbiev is going to hit him. And what happens is once Beterbiev gets a couple good shots in, guys lose their fight. They can't get away from him, and he grinds them down. But if Bivol can stay the course and not be undone by a couple big shots and keep boxing and moving and giving him angles, I think that's why it's a great fight. It's a classic out fighter versus a classic in fighter, and it's going to be who can impose their will on the other guy. What scares me about it, Beterbiev, is, as you said earlier, his age, and I'm worried about the injury a little bit. And as the fight gets closer, I'm sorry. If I had to pick today, I would pick Bivol. I may change, but I've been leaning that way.
A week ago. Okay. That's fair. But okay, we'll talk more about it as we get closer. It's still like 3 weeks or so away. But Frank, okay. It was a lot of fun. Anthony Joshua dominated this show, and I'm sure we haven't heard the last of them. But it was Daniel Dubois' night. The hail to him. Full credit to Daniel Dubois.
Yes, and he's a good man and a good ambassador for the sport. I like him a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week.